Hi colleagues, welcome back to another video by me. I am Jen LaMaster, the Assistant Principal at Brebeuf Jesuit in Indianapolis, Indiana. What you are seeing is my husband's office at Marian University on the day that we are recording this. Of course, during a crisis like we are having and all this online education, we have no power at our house, so here we are. But the show must go on, right? And today we are talking a little bit about communicating outcomes. So what does that even mean? For the purpose of this, and because of our roles as teachers, we're going to look at how we share or exchange information with our students primarily in order to communicate our outcomes, what we want them to do. So this is my clever little thing here. If we're sharing or exchanging information and an outcome is the way things are supposed to turn out, then ultimately we're communicating outcomes is how we teachers share information to our students on how to best turn in their learning objectives. So you know this, right? So we have a lot of different ways that we create outcomes for our educational practices. I would say globally, so I'm an assistant principal in my day job mainly, though I do teach a class, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But our context is Jesuit schools. Our global learning outcome is creating men and women for others. Short and sweet. We also might say that we have learning outcomes or outcomes in the graduate at graduation, that we hope our students leave us in 4 years and become the grad at grad. We have Catholic social teaching outcomes. We have Jesuit identity outcomes. You probably have a local school-based academic learning objectives that you want your students to hit. You get the idea. There are these global learning objectives. So we do the same thing, though, in our classrooms. And if you don't, you should. So as an assistant principal, I have been the moving force, some might say nag instigator, on creating learning outcomes for every course that we offer. And so we have asked our faculty to do course learning outcomes, which you can see on this slide. This is from my course, which is a newspaper, a publication news course. And these are the things, and we usually say, try to keep it to five or seven. This is not a litany of everything you're doing. These are the core learning outcomes. You take this class, you will have this when you walk out of this class. So these are those big picture things. So you can read these on your own, but you'll notice that one of our core learning outcomes, or one of the things I want students to walk away with, is to explore modern and emerging technologies in journalism, such as blah, 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 blah. So what we do at a micro level, some people would call this an indicator of the learning outcome. How do I know that I've explored modern and emergent technologies? Well, one of the concrete things I did was I learned InDesign. I activated my account, I got it on my computer, I practiced with it, and that helped me reach my upper goal. So lots of ways you can consider learning outcomes. Macro, school level, grad at grad. Department level, we have our departments write core outcomes. Course level, day-to-day outcomes. Right? So it gets more and more detailed to the concrete. Ultimately, though, it is allowing students to know what they are learning, why they are learning it, and how best they're going to show you, the teacher, what they have learned so you know that they've mastered the concept. So how do we do this? Big fan of backwards design. You saw in your readings some detailed things from Wiggins and Mateague, whole books on this, whole conferences on this. I'm sure somebody wrote a doctoral dissertation on this. All backwards design is saying is that we have this mission and purpose, either as our school or our department. This is our goal. How are we going to work backwards to get there? If you claim your desired results, what are your outcomes? What do I want students to know? I have a better idea of creating evidence. This is your assessments. These are your papers. These are your labs if you're in math. These are your homework problems if you're labs in science, homework problems in math. These are your dialogues in world language. What evidence do students need to create in order for me to say, oh yeah, you got this? So for me in newspaper, I have a learning outcome for the course that says you'll explore emerging technologies in journalism. So you saw one of my indicators for that. They'll know InDesign. How do students show me that? Well, they create print pages in InDesign. And I know that at the end of the semester, I have, say, 25 students in my class. This happened last semester with 24. Every single student created at least one page for print in InDesign, meeting all of the style guide implications and all of that. Check. I know. I have evidence that every single child did that. And every single child knew that was the evidence that I was looking for. Okay. So, and then a learning plan is the details every day. So how do I teach them InDesign? Well, we all log in one day and we all follow the bouncing mouse one day. And then they try it on a separate topic that they all experienced. Last year or 2 years ago, we used the eclipse, the total eclipse, because we went out during the school day. So every student's had a common shared experience. So they all made a page on InDesign. You get it? We're working backwards. We don't start with that nitty gritty stuff. We start with the big picture, and then how are we going to get there? So online learning environments takes the notch up a little bit. Some of this we muddle through in our face-to-face classes. We might put learning objectives on the whiteboard in the front of the room. We might have posters that say, in this class, you will learn these things. We might just verbally say it to our students. But it's even more critical in these environments, online and blended environments, to be super, super clear about what our objectives and our outcomes are. So this is some research that I listened to a presenter talk about as to why it's important to really, really, really articulate and be very careful in online environments. So when students perceive us as responsible, dedicated educators in the real world, we have a lot of things called immediacy behaviors. We dress the part. Our classroom looks a certain way. We greet them at the door. We smile at them. We might touch them on the shoulder gently. Hey, how was the sporting event last night? All of these things that we've gotten to do to create our own respect culture. Classroom culture is probably a better word for it. All those were gone. So we have to pay particular attention to what these immediacy behaviors might look like in the classroom. And what's interesting in the online classroom. So what's interesting in this research is it shows that our organizational skills, our figurative language in our PowerPoints like this, the colors we use, the type, no Comic Sans, visual imagery, all these elements that we always sort of thought were kind of the secondary extras, super duper important in getting students to understand what we are trying to bring across, which is a fancy word for our learning outcomes and articulating those. It's interesting because I sat in a webinar the other day by Rick Wormley, and he was talking about how in stress situations, our bodies are so, and the Atlantic ran an article, Washington Post has run an article on this too. Our brain chemistry is so focused on taking care of us in the immediate danger ourselves are in, that we miss all the little details. We're so hyper-focused on whatever it is that's threatening our safety that we can't process and really sink in what else is going on. So if we take that into communicating learning objectives, it's particularly important that we are blatantly clear, that we repeat our directions. Both we as adult educators and every single one of our students has been in a chronic, stressed environment for months now, and it's not lifting. And some of our students are deeper in that stress than others, but all of them are under deep, deep stress. We are under stress and forgetting things. So the clearer we can be, the more direct we can be, the more repetitive we can be, and the more forgiving we can be with that child who says, I don't, what did you say? It's going to happen. So figuring out how to do that best. So make your expectations clear. This is a sample from a college course, actually, of Dr. Krista Longton or Hoffman Longton, who is a friend of mine, but she is super clear. And she is super clear in even the directions. 11 tips to getting a great grade on your discussion forum. Well, there's nothing vague about that. Super clear. This is what you need to do to get a good grade on the discussion forum. Then she's got another page. How to get a good grade on your paper. How to get a good grade on your test. How to get a good grade on your short essay. Whatever it is. Super clear. Use language that students recognize. This is very BuzzFeedy language. And I know it sounds a little bit gimmicky, but when their brains are so inundated with information and stressors right now, the clearer we can be, the more we can use their languages, the better off the message, that communication piece, that transfer of information is going to be. So this is an example of one of our teachers at Brebeuf. We require weekly agendas to go out the Friday for the following week for every class. We started that this spring. We're carrying it into summer school, and we will continue it into the fall. Now, this is a fancy agenda. I'm going to be honest, in newspaper, man, we're not so fancy. But every Friday, teachers communicate it out. Here's the course, so you can see it's English 11, Virtual Brit Lit. What the weekly schedule is going to look like. And again, these are bigger learning outcomes. This isn't the nitty-gritty, everything that we're going to do, because some people on Friday don't know what we're going to do. That's fine. But these are the big objectives of the week. And then she puts in fun little things. So an immediacy behavior that Ms. Fable uses is every week she had a picture of something, and then students could also engage. They had a little discussion forum going that was very informal. It wasn't worth any points or anything. This one, she was talking about pets of quarantine, so kids could share pictures of their pets, family under quarantine, just little get to know yous. This is kind of fun to do. Especially if you're onboarding new students. Today, we started our summer school, so we're onboarding 110 new freshmen, rising 8th graders who have never been on a Brebeuf course before. So we tried to figure out ways to do these virtual icebreakers, and one of these asynchronous little get-to-know-you activities was part of that. For me in newspaper, we had a running Google slide agenda that we've used for years. This was not a new thing, but it helps me as an assistant principal and a classroom teacher remember what I'm doing. But every day we have a slide that says exactly what is going to happen and exactly what the goals of that day are, and I try to do it a week out in advance. Do you have to modify it sometime? Sure, but it's clear. It's predictable. The students know every Friday by 4, I'm going to get agendas from all my teachers. It's supportive. Every Friday, I will know that I get agendas from all my teachers, and I know what's expected of me in the following week. So here is another example. This is a class that actually started today, and this is that view, that more vertical view of how this could look. So this is basic public speaking. This course will be completely online at Brebeuf this semester. There are 11 sections of speech running and 7 teachers, I believe, teaching it. So we built a master course in Google Classroom, which you can do now. And then each teacher could grab the pieces they needed for their individual Google site or Google Classroom site. So you can see the course has an objective. The purpose of this course is to provide students with the basic fundamentals of speech and aid them in developing their speaking skills for use in academic, social, and business settings. Boom. That is the big outcome. That is what's going to happen. And every student sees this, and every parent sees this. Then the teacher broke it down, this team of teachers actually broke it down into their, 6 outcomes that breaks this macro objective down to slightly smaller objectives. So how are we going to do that? We're going to create engaging presentations. We're going to critically analyze information. We're going to listen actively. You get the idea. Then on the day-to-day, each day students go into Google Classroom and there's their daily agenda. So today's the first day of class. Here's the link so the students know where it is. And here are the things that we are going to do today. And here are all the documents that you need. You can see them linked down there. And if you wanted to, in Google Classroom up at the top, this would all have been put in a calendar too. It is repetitive. It is super clear. It is well organized spatially and by color, so students feel confident in that teacher and this course, and absolutely everything they need is right there. This teacher goes on even further, so they have their first assessment tomorrow because summer school goes real fast when you're getting a semester course in 3 weeks. Again, it's not a secret. We want students to understand the outcomes and what they have to do to show mastery in it. So this is an example of a rubric for the first speech, which is a short introduction speech. Again, very clear. Here's the prompt. Here are things for you to think about, and here are the things I am assessing you on. So students are very clearly exposed to what are the core learning objectives of the course and the day and the assessment, what is expected of them to produce for showing mastery, looking at this rubric. And at that point, in a fully online environment, students should feel fairly confident that they understand what is expected of them because they've been clearly communicated with. Going the next step, so that's sort of communicating it, just food for thought. Remember that your objectives are going to drive the courses that you have, or the courses are going to drive the choices you make in your courses. So there are group presentations. You can do discussion forums. You can do individual projects like a speech. The introduction speech that you just saw actually is a pair activity. You interview somebody else and they interview you. So it's got a little bit higher investment of students because they got to not embarrass their partner. But whatever your objective is, in my case, if it's InDesign, show me that you know how, that you downloaded InDesign. That's a quick did you do it checklist item. But when I want students to talk about what's the best layout and what theories of layout did you use in this particular page, that's going to be a higher investment. That's going to be a little bit deeper assessment choice for me to determine. So in case you're curious, I make them have a one-on-one conference with me or a page team with their editor meeting with me. Just as you're thinking about moving your two outcomes, your lowest level kind of things are see and hear, reading checks, pop quizzes, what did you hear, what was your favorite thing, reflections. When students have to start talking to each other in a group or with a teacher, then they actually have to re-articulate and put in their own words. That's a deeper understanding of the objectives. And then taking it right into doing and actual application. So if you are a science teacher, you may do a quick exit ticket. You can do those online. Say you are doing cells, naming the parts of the cells. So your quick exit ticket is you give them an image and they have to fill in 2 or 3 boxes to tell you what parts of the cell they're looking at. The next day, they might go into small groups and start planning their lab. And then the final time, they're doing their actual lab to show you how they would analyze an actual cell in a lab setting. So it's moving towards higher level performance. But that all is tied to your objective as you have articulated it to students so they know what you expect of them. This is just then a little bit of review on what I have been talking about in curriculum and assessment. Use the IPP. It is strong and it will help you write objectives. You actually could probably use the IPP instead of backwards design. We tend to do it kind of hand in hand, but that would be up to you. Backwards design, the documents and the readings are in the folder that I shared with you for this. Some ways that can really help you consider if you're really stuck on what the objective is, particularly as we're going out of e-learning in the spring and you may not have, the class before yours may not have covered as much information in the past. So when we're coming back in August or September, when your school comes back, figuring out where students are to modify objectives that you already have. We're already talking about giving a lot of pre-tests and post-tests, pre-testing students when they come in, just to make sure, where are you? Because that's going to help guide our rewriting of some of our learning outcomes. We know for sure in, say, the languages and in mathematics that students in level ones did not get as much as typical to go on to level 2, 2 to 3, that kind of stuff. So a pre-test can be your friend. You know what your objectives are. Let's make sure that the students are where you think they are, because this year they may not be. Various ways of assessment and feedback, and figuring out choice in mastery. This picture off to the side, this is also from my class. When we first went to e-learning, I asked the students to do a photo essay. So here is still meeting our core objective of exploring different sorts of media and expressions of journalism. So we looked at some New York Times photo essays, National Geographic photo essays, other kinds of photo essays. Students were asked to create a photo essay that had a message. I did ask them to use words as well as images. They had to have 5 images. So see, there's guardrails around this. But they could use any product they wanted to in order to create their photo essay. So you can see here, some did Google Slides. I have an iMovie. There is Google Photo lets you make collages and put text boxes in. And somebody else in there is a super high flyer, and she used Adobe Illustrator because that's what she wanted to use. I don't care. That was fine. Product came in whatever ways imaginable with my guardrails, because I knew ultimately my goal was I wanted to expose them to developing ways that journalists are writing and sharing the news these days. So it's intentional. It takes some thought. We are not trying to trick our students. The clearer we communicate our outcomes, the more supportive they feel, the more predictable the curriculum feels. And I think you're going to end up with better illustrations of mastery and deeper analysis and deeper synthesis of what you are asking students to do if we do those simple little clear communication pieces in the beginning. Thanks.